Now, if you use a virtual voice assistant, you might sometimes find yourself repeating a question over and over again, and maybe that's because the device can't understand your accent. Now, a new UK study found that 79% of people with a regional accent using voice recognition software like Google Home, Alexa and Siri had to alter how they spoke in order to communicate with their devices. Just take a look at this.
Voice recognition technology in a lift in Scotland. You ever tried voice recognition technology?
No.
They don't do Scottish accents.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11. 11. 11. 11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent.
11. 11. That sounds Irish, not American.
No, doesn't it?
11. Where in America is that? Dublin?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
Okay, joining me here in the studio to discuss this is Stephanie Hare, an independent technology analyst, and Jeff Kaufman. He's also a journalist and founder of Trint, an automated speech-to-text software based here in the UK. Thank you both for joining us here on the programme. Jeff, I'll begin with you. You run this speech-to-text software company. Just tell us a little bit about how it actually works.
Well, what I set out to do as a journalist was to find a way to disrupt the transcription market, because I spent, like so many in the BBC here, thousands of hours of my life transcribing manually, play, stop, type it out. And I wanted to see whether we could leverage speech to text so that we could, it would do the heavy lifting. You know, people are afraid of this stuff, but it can also liberate us from so many tasks that are tedious, time-consuming, and allow us to focus on content rather than stenography. Speech-to-text is really, to answer your question, it's about the sound and it's about the context, the meaning. So, you know, you take the word bean, which we say here in the UK and we say in Canada, where I'm from. When I moved to the US, I had to learn how to say bin. But of course, bin is also where Americans put their rubbish. And in Boston, they say Ben, which is also the name of a person. So you can't just take the sound or you'll get it wrong. So speech-to-text has to understand both the sound and the context.
Stephanie, Jeff just pointed out here that this is something that some people are afraid of. Should we be afraid?
I think it's because there's a lack of regulation at the moment around biometrics, and we must remember that our voice data is biometric data.
It's our DNA.
Exactly. So just like your DNA or your fingerprint or your facial recognition print, right, from a photograph or just someone watching you on a video, your voice is something that's unique to you and which could be used in ways that you might not want, to impersonate you, to commit fraud, etc. So I think the lack of regulation at the moment is something that policymakers, lawmakers really need to get on in order to reassure people and help business people really create these amazing opportunities.
On Stephanie's point there, in order to make this better, so that, you know, people from the regions don't have to repeat themselves over and over again, they need to access data, don't they?
Yeah, the data set is critical. That's why you have the most accurate speech-to-text algorithms are American English and British English, because you have transcriptions of programs like this, which can then be played against what we're saying, so the data sets can learn. When you get into regional accents, you know, in English, depending on how you measure it, there are about 160 different dialects alone in English, and about 36 major ones. And of those 36 major ones, half of them are here in the United Kingdom. And we all know that when we get into certain areas, into Scotland, into Ireland, it really is very far from the English that we're speaking here. And so they're really different languages, and that's the challenge.
And so it's not prioritized?
You know, these are economically driven, aren't they? And it's not just prioritized. That suggests that there's some sort of insidious agenda. I think it's really about, one, is there a data set available? And is there a market that can sustain and justify the cost of investment? But these things are now being done automatically. You know, we're starting to see even secondary and tertiary languages in small countries with automated speech offerings. If you go to Google Translate, for example, it's astonishing. They have 14 different, I think it is, versions of Arabic now that they offer. So we are getting there. The challenge is not just the regional accents, it's the audio quality. You know, I have a microphone right here, and we're in a quiet studio. If we were sitting in a Starbucks with music on, with people talking, it would really degrade the quality.
Ms. Stephanie, I mean, with any of this kind of technology, you know, just the kind of smart living that people have now, there are concerns about security and privacy.
Yes, and rightly so. There isn't a single company or even government that hasn't been hacked, right? Whether or not they say it publicly or acknowledge it, exactly. So I think we have to really, again, it's not about stopping technology. It's about creating the conditions in which technology can be used to help human beings flourish, and where it's transparent, it's accountable, and it's benefiting everyone equally. So even as we were just discussing here, we're having this conversation in English, and there's a couple of different accents around this little trio even, right? But what are we missing out on by not broadcasting in 180 languages simultaneously, or for this to be heard and transcribed in all of those languages as well? I mean, the opportunities that await this technology are really marvelous, but we just want to build it with ethics in mind and feedback.
And I suppose it goes back to the concern of this kind of technology as it develops, is the machine controlling us, or are we controlling the machines?
You know, I do think there's reason to be wary, and I think that you know, it's interesting when I lecture to younger students, there's that sort of Facebook, Instagram generation of millennials and post-millennials. There is a cohort that will tell you, I give up, you know, I don't care, I'll post anything, I don't care what my mom sees, and you know, I think that there is a sense that this is just the genie's out of the bottle and it's not going to go back in. I'm not suggesting that's a good thing, but I agree that we do need regulation. I'm very skeptical that it's going to be possible on a global scale. We'll
have to see you know, how all this develops and as you say, the ethics around these things. Stephanie and Jeff, thank you both for joining us here on the program. Do stay with us. We'll be back in the next few minutes with more Impact.